An 85-year-old woman named Pilar is spending her evening at a small coffee shop in Madrid, Spain. But when she checks her wristwatch, something strange happens. Time suddenly stops just before 8 o'clock. Not long after that, Pilar heads to an apartment where another elderly woman is found dead on the floor. Nearby, there is a birthday cake, along with a photo of a woman hidden inside a drawer and surrounded by strands of hair. Oddly enough, Pilar does not seem disturbed by any of it. A few moments later, a blonde woman arrives completely naked and hands Pilar a matryoshka doll. Pilar looks overwhelmed with happiness. She even drops to her knees and kisses the woman. The story then shifts to Susana, a professional model who has been working in Paris for the last 6 years. Susana is Pilar's granddaughter, and ever since she was little, she has lived with her grandmother after losing both of her parents in an accident. Even after moving away, Susana still returns to Madrid every few months to visit Pilar. After finishing a commercial photo shoot, Susana tries calling her grandmother, but there is no answer. So she leaves a voice message explaining that she cannot come back to Madrid for their shared birthday celebration on March 22nd because of an important job opportunity. Later that night, Susana relaxes at a nightclub popular among models and talent agents. She and several of her friends eventually slip away into a private room to do drugs. But not long after, everything changes. Susana receives a call from St. Gabriel Hospital in Madrid. The hospital informs her that Pilar has been hospitalized after an accident. Although her condition is stable, she is still unconscious. Since Susana is Pilar's only remaining relative, the hospital asks her to come immediately. The very next day, Susana boards a flight back to Madrid. During the trip, she falls asleep and dreams about a disturbing memory from her childhood, where she sees Pilar laughing together with another naked elderly woman. This is the grandmother. After arriving at the Madrid airport, Susana heads straight to St. Gabriel Hospital. There, the doctor explains that a few days earlier, one of Pilar's neighbors found her collapsed inside her apartment after noticing the front door had been left open. The doctors later discovered that Pilar had suffered a brain hemorrhage caused by a ruptured blood vessel, which severely damaged parts of her brain. Because of that, she will now struggle with daily activities, her motor skills and speech have deteriorated, and there is even a chance that she may no longer recognize Susana. Unfortunately, there are no other relatives who can help. Susana's parents both died in an accident when she was still a child, leaving Pilar as the only family she had left. The doctor recommends placing Pilar in a nursing home that specializes in caring for elderly patients with severe conditions. But despite everything, Susana refuses to leave her grandmother there. Instead, she decides to bring Pilar home and hire someone to help care for her. So Susana takes her grandmother back to Pilar's apartment. Since the electricity is out, she opens all the windows to let some light and air inside. While looking around, she notices several dead plants, an empty bird cage, and then suddenly spots Pilar standing up from her wheelchair, silently staring at a massive portrait of herself from when she was young. For the time being, Susana decides to stay there and take care of her grandmother, who still sits in silence without saying a single word. Because the bathroom mirror has strangely been sealed behind a wall, Susana buys a small handheld mirror for herself. Around the neighborhood, she also notices perfume advertisements featuring her own modeling photos. Later that night, Susana receives a call from her boss, Elvira, who checks in on her condition. Elvira also reveals that the modeling job originally meant for Susana has now been given to another model named Zoe. After the call, Susana gently feeds Pilar some soft avocado, but Pilar suddenly begins choking, forcing Susana to quickly help clear her throat. Once everything calms down, Susana puts her grandmother to bed, hugs her, and kisses her affectionately before getting ready for the night herself. But while applying skincare in front of the mirror, Susana suddenly notices something unsettling. One strand of her hair has turned completely gray. Not long after that, Pilar suddenly begins screaming in terror from inside her room. She is so distressed that she even wets the bed for reasons Susana cannot understand. Even so, Susana patiently cleans her grandmother, gives her a bath, and gently puts her back to bed. Wanting to take better care of her, Susana starts watching YouTube tutorials about elderly care. She learns everything from using waterproof pads under the body to applying special creams and even how to properly put on adult diapers. After finally finishing all the caregiving duties, Susana briefly checks Zoe's Instagram out of curiosity. But later that night, after falling asleep, she experiences a horrifying nightmare. In the dream, someone quietly enters her bedroom. It turns out to be Pilar, completely naked. Slowly, Pilar approaches the bed, pulls down Susanna's pants, and places her finger inside Susanna's mouth. Thankfully, Susanna suddenly wakes up and realizes it was only a dream. The next morning, Susanna goes back to feeding her grandmother, but something feels very wrong. Pilar keeps laughing non-stop while watching the news, even though nothing remotely funny is happening on television. Susanna eventually turns the TV off so her grandmother can focus on eating, but Pilar continues laughing anyway. Susanna assumes it might just be another symptom caused by the brain damage. However, while putting away food in the kitchen, she notices something unsettling. Every clock inside the apartment has stopped at exactly the same time, just before 8 o'clock. At first, she tries to brush it off as a coincidence. Later, while Susanna is taking a shower, someone rings the apartment bell. The visitor turns out to be a woman named Eva. She explains that she and Susanna had met a few times in the past because their grandmothers were close friends. Eva also reveals that for the last 4 months, she has been regularly helping Pilar around the apartment, taking her on walks to the park, and assisting with daily chores. She even has a spare key to the apartment, which is why she let herself in earlier. After failing to contact Pilar for several days, Eva became worried and decided to check on her personally. Susanna then explains everything that happened to her grandmother. Eva is shocked and saddened by the news, especially since Pilar had seemed perfectly fine the last time they spoke just a week earlier. She also shares that her own grandmother recently passed away due to illness. Because of how close she became to Pilar, Eva already knows a lot about Susanna through Pilar's stories, along with the many magazine covers and advertisements featuring Susanna's modeling career. Not long after that, Eva heads home, and Susanna thanks her for taking care of Pilar all this time. Afterward, Susanna starts searching for elderly care services, but every agency turns her down because Pilar's condition is considered too complicated. Fortunately, one foundation finally agrees to help, and they arrange for a nurse to visit the apartment in 2 days. As usual, Susanna continues taking care of her grandmother and closes the bedroom window that somehow keeps opening on its own. Before going to sleep, she also promises her boss, Elvira, that she will return to work in Paris as soon as possible. But later that night, Susanna suddenly hears strange noises coming from the apartment hallway. When she goes to check, she finds Pilar seemingly talking to someone inside a room, even though nobody else is there. Then, without warning, the lights suddenly go out. Curious and unsettled, Susanna steps into the dark room, but the door suddenly slams shut behind her. When she finally enters Pilar's bedroom, her grandmother is already lying in bed again, quietly staring toward the window, which has mysteriously opened once more. Susanna closes and locks it before trying to return to her own room, but then she hears Pilar's bedroom door opening again. Trying to control her fear, Susanna checks on her grandmother one more time and is horrified by what she sees. Pilar's body is trembling violently, and dark veins begin spreading all over her skin. Panicking, Susanna immediately calls for an ambulance, but just seconds later, everything suddenly stops. Pilar calmly falls asleep again, and the veins completely disappear, as if nothing ever happened.
Hola, no sé qué te pasa. Joder.
After witnessing something so bizarre, Susanna becomes too terrified to sleep that night. She keeps the television on just to avoid the silence inside the apartment. The next morning, she checks on Pilar and is relieved to find her sleeping peacefully. While looking around the room, Susanna suddenly remembers an old diary from her childhood that she had hidden years ago above the mattress. The diary is locked, and the key had also been secretly hidden behind a poster. Once she opens it, Susanna becomes overwhelmed with memories from her childhood and remembers how deeply she loved her grandmother. She recalls their shared birthday on March 22nd, when she was 8 years old. That was the first time Pilar invited her close friend Julita over to celebrate. Julita arrived with her granddaughter Eva, who was the same age as Susanna. During the party, both girls were given a strange red drink that tasted unusual but oddly pleasant. Pilar also cut a piece of Susanna's hair for reasons that were never explained. Then that same night, young Susanna experienced a terrifying nightmare about her grandmother, a nightmare she never forgot. After feeding Pilar once again, Susanna notices a photograph of her grandmother standing closely beside Eva, showing just how close the two families had become over the years. Later, Susanna steps outside for a smoke and sees that the perfume company has already replaced her with another model for their newest advertisement. Realizing she cannot stay away from work forever, Susanna immediately calls Elvira and promises that she will return to Paris soon, especially since the nurse for Pilar is scheduled to arrive the next day. But the moment she returns to the apartment, something is terribly wrong. Pilar has disappeared. Panicked, Susana rushes outside and spends hours searching through the streets of Madrid, all the way into the night. But there is no sign of her grandmother anywhere. Eventually, Susana returns to the apartment and prepares to call the police to report Pilar missing. But just as she reaches the door, she suddenly finds Pilar calmly sitting there, as if nothing happened. Susana desperately wants answers about where she went, but Pilar remains completely silent, refusing to respond in any way. As the stress keeps building, Susana becomes more frustrated while trying to feed her grandmother. Pilar stubbornly keeps her mouth shut, then suddenly laughs at Susana after accidentally spitting food onto her. Exhausted and irritated, Susana puts Pilar back to bed and immediately goes to sleep herself. But later that night, she notices a strange flickering light coming from outside her room. Curious, Susana follows the light as it grows brighter and brighter. Then something horrifying begins to happen. Her hair suddenly turns gray, her teeth start falling out, and her entire body rapidly ages before her eyes. Thankfully, it turns out to be another nightmare. But this time, Susana wakes up screaming inside Pilar's bed, while Pilar herself is peacefully sleeping in the other room. Not long after that, the nurse finally arrives as promised. Her name is Marpua, and she warmly introduces herself to Pilar. After a short visit, Marpua leaves and confirms that she will officially begin working the next day at 11 in the morning. That same afternoon, Susana plans to fly back to Paris. For the first time in days, Susana finally feels relieved. She believes she can now return to her career without constantly worrying about her grandmother. However, just before stepping outside for some fresh air, Susana witnesses something deeply unsettling. She sees Pilar standing by the window, whispering incomprehensible words while moving her hands in strange motions, almost as if she is performing some kind of ritual. Then, seconds later, something horrifying happens completely out of nowhere. Marpua is suddenly struck and killed in a violent accident at the exact moment Pilar finishes her strange chanting. Terrified beyond belief, Susana refuses to return to the apartment after witnessing that. Instead, she isolates herself at a ramen shop before eventually spending the rest of the night resting alone at a bus stop. While sitting there in fear and confusion, Susana suddenly remembers the nursing home brochure that the doctor had recommended earlier. The next morning, Susana returns to the apartment, only to find Pilar still standing silently by the window, staring outside like she never moved at all. Without wasting any more time, Susana packs up her grandmother's belongings and takes her straight to the nursing home. Even though she feels guilty, she apologizes to Pilar and convinces herself this is the only safe option left. After returning to the apartment, Susana leaves a voice message for Elvira, confirming that she will finally be flying back to Paris that very night. But just as things seem ready to calm down, another disturbing incident happens. While cooking eggs in the kitchen, Susana suddenly discovers that they are filled with worms. At the same time, a news report announces that the nursing home has been heavily damaged by a fire that spread rapidly after a sofa caught flames. Thankfully, no one was killed. Susana is horrified by the news, and her fear grows even worse when she suddenly realizes Pilar is somehow already back inside the apartment, calmly smiling at her. After witnessing Marpua's death, the nursing home fire, and all the terrifying events surrounding her grandmother, Susana finally becomes convinced that Pilar possesses supernatural powers. In other words, she believes her grandmother is a witch. Realizing she may never escape Pilar's influence, Susana makes a desperate decision. She secretly poisons Pilar's dinner. After feeding her only a few spoonfuls, Pilar suddenly struggles to breathe before eventually dying in front of her. Not long afterward, Susana's phone alarm suddenly goes off. The time shows midnight, and the date is now March 22nd, the shared birthday of both Susana and Pilar. Trying to stay calm, Susana calls the police and reports that her grandmother has just died after choking on food. She asks for an ambulance to come immediately, but seconds later, another terrifying discovery leaves her frozen. A photograph that originally showed Pilar standing beside Eva has somehow changed. Now the picture shows Susana standing beside Eva instead. Then the house phone suddenly rings. It is Eva, and strangely, she refers to Susana as Pilar. At the same time, Susana notices maggots crawling through Pilar's food and even inside Pilar's mouth before the apartment suddenly loses power. Moments later, Susana hears the sound of a lighter being struck somewhere in the darkness. Slowly, she follows the glow into another room, where she discovers a candle burning in front of the large portrait of young Pilar. No matter what she does, Susana cannot extinguish the flame. Even after removing the candle itself, the fire continues burning until it suddenly disappears on its own. Then, a hidden compartment beneath the painting opens by itself. Inside, Susana finds an old childhood photo of herself, surrounded by the strands of hair that Pilar had secretly cut from her years earlier. At that moment, the horrifying truth finally becomes clear. Pilar and her close friend Julita were likely involved in some kind of demonic ritual designed to keep themselves alive forever. Their method was to transfer their souls into the bodies of their own granddaughters once they reached a certain age, specifically on their shared birthdays. And just like Pilar is now targeting Susana, Julita had already transferred herself into Eva long ago. That also explains why Pilar seems so happy at the beginning of the story after seeing her friend alive again inside a younger body. Terrified, Susana hides inside the bathroom. But suddenly, cracks begin spreading across the walls until the mirror violently shatters apart. Then, from inside the broken mirror, Pilar's hand suddenly reaches out and grabs Susana by the hair. Susana desperately tries to escape the apartment, but Pilar's supernatural power stops her completely as every clock inside the apartment suddenly begins ringing at once. A moment later, Susana loses control of her own body. Pilar's unseen force completely paralyzes her before violently slamming her onto the floor. Slowly, Pilar walks towards Susana while whispering strange chants and moving her hands in unnatural motions, forcing Susana to open her mouth against her will. Then after a few horrifying moments, the ritual is finally complete. Pilar awakens once again, but this time inside Susana's young body. At that exact moment, every clock inside the apartment suddenly begins working normally again, as if the curse has finally ended. Now fully possessing Susana's body, Pilar calmly approaches her old lifeless body lying nearby. The transfer is complete, and she has successfully escaped death by taking over her granddaughter's life. In the final moments of the film, Pilar, now living inside Susana's body, stands in front of the massive portrait inside the apartment. The painting has also changed. It no longer shows the old Pilar, but instead reflects her new appearance as Susana. Not long after that, Eva arrives at the apartment and admires Pilar's brand new body, revealing that the two old women have finally succeeded in cheating death together. So the moral of the story is never trust a grandma who cuts your hair, laughs at the news, and keeps standing near windows like she's downloading dark magic updates.